with those that were arrested and abused by the Nigerian police a few weeks ago when protesting as part of the End Bad Governors campaign. And we now understand that those that have been arrested been awarded bail and being released, if that's still correct. We've made a small donation to help with the cost of that, and hence this meeting as well. Today, we're pleased to have Deji on call, who is the chair of the Nigerian Solidarity Campaign here in the UK. He will speak first.
I guess, first of all, I'd like to say, very much thank you to this union and for everyone that's donated to help the campaign. It's, the money's really gone a long way in terms of helping us both in dealing with the arrest and charges that the protesters face, but also in, campaigning against these policies. Nigeria is it's a country with a huge amount of resources and a huge amount of wealth. It's a major oil exporter. It's got huge natural resources of gas and other minerals. But despite that, Nigeria is also a country with huge levels of poverty. It's got the second highest rate of hunger, second only to India, which has a much larger population. And really, Nigeria has been, I guess, facing various issues and various contradictions for a number of decades. While being a huge oil exporter, there are also huge shortages of refined oil and petrol. You find people queuing for days to get petrol. There's also a lack of reliable electricity. Despite those resources, most people don't get regular electricity, and even those on the most regular kind of connections, it's unreliable. And I think in the last couple of weeks there have been 2 or 3 nationwide grid disruptions. And really, I think a part of the root cause of that is because of the corruption in Nigeria in the government. Presidents and ministers from different political parties have really took a lot of wealth and money out of Nigeria while doing nothing to invest in the resources and services that the population needs. And but the latest crisis really that's faced Nigeria started about 1.5 years ago when the new President Tinubu, came to power and launched what can really only be described as an attack on the poor and the masses in Nigeria. He basically followed the advice and guidance of institutions like the World Bank and the IMF, and removed fuel subsidies basically overnight. No one expected it. He said it in his first presidential speech, and what that did was it caused fuel prices to basically double overnight. And that had huge effects, of course, because fuel prices are embedded in everything, as we know here in the UK. We've experienced that. But on top of those issues, and I guess to describe the extent of those issues, more recently, a lot of government workers now don't even get. They've been told by their bosses basically that they shouldn't go into the office for 2 days a week because the cost of public transport, the cost of fuel has just risen so much that they can't. That at least in the public sector, they just say, okay, we can't pay you more, so just don't come into the office often. If you work in the private sector, it's less easy to negotiate that, and many people have been driven to all sorts of desperations for that. I guess on top of that, barely a few months later, the president also announced that he would float the currency, the naira, which basically meant that the exchange rate would no longer be kind of fixed and propped up by the central bank, but it'd be left to the market conditions to dictate the exchange rates. And what that's meant is over the last year and a half or so, yeah, I think the pound to the naira to the dollar has I think almost tripled. Yeah, I don't have the numbers for this because it was going to be Abby's part of the discussion. But what that did was it compounded the issue of the devaluation of the removal of fuel subsidies, and basically increased fuel prices even more and increased inflation even more, and left many Nigerians in an extremely desperate situation. To give, I guess, a bit more of an idea, you know, the when that happened in the UK, there were a number of Nigerian students who had, you know, previously saved up money to do a master's or to do a few years of studying in the UK, where you know, they were hoping to kind of use that education as an opportunity to get more opportunities in their life. And many people, you know, they would save their, you know, they'd be borrowing money from their family. But when the currency devalued, it basically meant that rather than paying their university fees at a ratio of, you know, 400 naira to £1, they were paying it at over 1,000 naira to £1. And for many Nigerian students, that meant that after a few months, you know, maybe they were able to pay the first batch, but after a few months of studying, they were getting threatening letters from the Home Office and from their universities themselves, demanding that they, you know, pay the rest of the university fees, otherwise they'll be kicked out of the country. And, you know, I guess just to add for some, I guess, local context, there was a little bit of a campaign in Surrey University around that, where we were able to kind of put pressure on the university with support from, you know, unions like yourself as well, writing in letters, and that was able to save a number of students, where they were able to basically negotiate with the university so that they could pay a segment of their fees rather than the full amount, because obviously they no longer had those savings that they had. But that's a bit of a side point. I think, you know, the pain has really been felt by those in Nigeria at the moment, and there have been a number of spontaneous protests over the last year, and they've, you know, trying to put pressure on the government to reverse the policies, which include things like university and general education fees going up, electricity tariffs going up, and other kind of, you know, import taxes and other fees going up. And there were some spontaneous protests, and I think, you know, they kind of dispersed over time. But most recently in August, it was comrades like Abby and others who helped organize the End Bad Governance protests in Nigeria. And these protests were, of course, rooted in the, you know, the hardship, the horrors that many Nigerians are facing, where, you know, there are many reports now that say many Nigerians are struggling to eat, you know, 1, 2, or 3 square meals a day. And so naturally there's, you know, a huge amount of anger about their situation. And what they saw, you know, across Africa in Kenya around that time was mass protests in Kenya that were able to reverse the austerity policies of the Ruto government in Kenya, where very similar sets of circumstances, where the IMF and other international institutions were saying that they needed to cut services, cut resources, and so on. But because of the 7 days of, I think it was 7 days of rage protests in Kenya, they were able to force the government into retreat. It included a day of strike action, which was kind of the peak, and they were able to get rid of, and they basically forced the government to reverse those policies and fire half of his cabinet. They attempted to do similar protests in Nigeria, but Tinubu really cracked down hard on those protests. A comrade, Adaramoye Michael, who has the nickname of Lenin, he was arrested, kidnapped in the middle of the night by basically the state police. Him alongside, I think there were 10 others who were kind of kidnapped and went through, and basically they were blindfolded, detained, interrogated, and held with no legal or family visits for a number of weeks. And it wasn't until a few weeks later that he, alongside I think it was 123 others, were remanded in detention. And it was only at that point that people knew where he was and what was going on, because it happened at a secret court, but then the state news basically announced what revealed that this was going on. And that's of course where our campaign kind of kicked into gear. We were already trying to organize solidarity with the protests that were taking place, but given the brutal authoritarian attacks on a young activist to be kidnapped in your bed in the middle of the night, we had to ramp up the campaign to support them. But it wasn't just Michael who was kidnapped. There are also journalists, civil rights groups, the trade union leader. So in Nigeria, there are two TUC type bodies. There's a TUC and the Nigeria Labour Congress. And the leader of the Nigeria Labour Congress was actually arrested on his way to visit the British TUC Congress conference. He was arrested at the airport and held by the police, and they took his passport because he was, he had showed a certain amount of support for these protests. And really, actually, in that situation, it was only thanks to the unions around him threatening to go on general strike that he was quickly released without charge. But the situation for Michael and the others, there are at least 10 others who have faced charges of treason, cyber stalking, terrorism funding, really ridiculous charges for people that were merely peacefully protesting against hunger and hardship. Thanks to the international campaign from unions, both inside Nigeria applying pressure, but also unions in the UK and internationally sending letters to the embassies and also organizing. We've organized protests outside the Nigerian embassy. Thanks to that kind of campaign, we were able to put pressure on the government to at least allow the arrested protesters to go on bail. And so thankfully we got those bail conditions. Unfortunately, they were ridiculously stringent. It was a £5,000 the bail cost was £5,000. But I guess for some context, a new minimum wage has been brought in. In Nigeria, it's a minimum monthly salary because of a number of reasons. But the new minimum monthly salary is merely £32 a month, and so this bail condition of £5,000 is unaffordable to the vast majority of Nigerians who don't even earn that minimum wage. That minimum wage is really mainly for government workers and a few in the private sector. But thanks to your generosity and the generosity of others in the UK and internationally, we're able to pay the bails, cover the bail for Michael and a number of other protesters as well. But really, I think the issues have continued. There has been no relenting from the government, and there's quite a serious issues of hunger and so on within Nigeria at the moment. And it's clear that this Tinubu government, he's frightful of the organized working class and the power of the organized working class, which is why he attacked the trade union leader and why he's attacked Michael and others who have been organizing these protests. But the issues there aren't just issues in affecting Nigerians in Nigeria. There are also Nigerians here in the UK who are now having to send more money back home to their friends and family, who are having to pay a lot more money in terms of fuel and food and so on. And so I think it would be if Nigerians, then definitely kind of talk to them about the issues and about the campaign that we're trying to run. But I think ultimately it's clear that this Tinubu government, like other governments in Nigeria in the past, don't represent the interest of the working class of Nigeria, the masses. And many in the protests, including Abby, who's not here at the moment. I need to see what happened. But Abby, the Campaign for Democratic Workers' Rights, and others like the Democratic Socialist Movement who are involved in these protests, have made it clear that what's needed in Nigeria is for the working class to have democratic and the youth to have democratic control over the wealth and the resources that clearly exist in this country, this OPEC plus nation, the biggest oil exporter in Africa, but to have democratic control of it so that the wealth and resources are used to support the working class there, to invest into education, healthcare, and so on, and kind of resolve all the issues that Nigerians face on the day-to-day. Whereas at the moment, it's billionaire and millionaire, millionaire and almost billionaire politicians who are literally stealing the wealth from the country. And I guess as a final point to describe that, there's 1% of the Nigerian budget has officially been allocated towards things that help the president and his family in terms of a new private jet. And I think there was like a set of cars for his wife. And now there are rumors that he's hoping to get a new yacht, a presidential yacht. So I think that kind of illustrates the contradictions of capitalism that exist in Nigeria, and the potential wealth that is just being stolen. But yeah, thank you, and thank you all for your donations and